it is. Flip it. Let's move.
Hi, welcome to Dead Principles. I spent my New Year's Eve watching the Jack Smith deposition because I'm a party animal, and I wanted to offer some comments and observations about what I took away from that. It was long; it was about 8 hours and 20 minutes, although that does include the breaks they took, so it wasn't really. It's probably more like 6.5 hours all in. And I did think that it was very interesting to just hear firsthand from Jack Smith what he was thinking and how he went about the decision making process for how he proceeded with the cases that he was responsible for. Although the thing I think I thought was the most telling was how the Republicans handled the whole operation, because the attorney that the Republicans had really tried to paint Jack Smith and his intentions in a very specific light and threw in quite a bit of color commentary that was really very biased. The thing that struck me most about the Republican attorney was he kept he basically kept asking Jack Smith, well, why did you do things according to the law? Why didn't you show Donald Trump special consideration? Which I think is an odd thing to ask someone who's prosecuting cases against a person. How often do you say, I don't believe that they would even ask those questions if Jack Smith had been prosecuting, a drug dealer or just run of the mill criminal. They wouldn't say, well, why didn't you do things a different way? Because one thing they asked was about subpoenas. Well, why did you subpoena this information? Why didn't you just go to his lawyer and ask for it? Well, because that's not really in the defense attorney's best interest to just, do anything beyond what's required by the law. That's the whole point. It's an oppositional relationship between the prosecution and the defense. I would think that any attorney would understand that, but the Republican attorney did not. And he also kept trying to hit the point that, oh, there's an undue burden forcing Trump to travel from one city to another city in order to in order to make appearances for all these different court cases. Well, first of all, isn't that kind of on Trump? If he didn't do so much questionable stuff, then he wouldn't have to show up in so many different courts. But also, this is a guy who notoriously has always bragged about how rich he is. And to my knowledge, he's exclusively traveled on private jets for years and years. So the suggestion that it's too difficult for him to make it to the locations where he's required by law to be, that's not much of an argument. This guy can go wherever he wants, whenever he wants, without any delays or interference of any kind, because he can do it on a private jet. So that seems like another on its face ridiculous argument. Also, Jim Jordan was very eager to try to Jim Jordan specifically, as well as the Republican attorney who was doing the majority of the questioning, were both trying so hard to catch Jack Smith in some kind of, not even a lie, just any kind of discrepancy, which was also very telling because they were clearly very desperate to try to identify any weakness, any possible way that they could, whittle away at some part of his integrity to suggest that he was biased or that he was gunning for Trump from the very beginning, which, based on everything that Jack Smith said, seems very apparently not to be the case. And I really admire Jack Smith for just enduring it, because they were, everybody on the Republican side who asked questions was just rapid fire spitting them at him. I think to try to just throw him off his game, but also because they would ask these questions, and as soon as Jack Smith started answering, it became very apparent, oh, this isn't going to be, you know, the silver bullet that's going to prove that he's a bad person or that we can, paint him in a negative light. And so they'd interrupt him before he even finished answering the question, just to ask the next question in the hope that that might be a way to trip him up. And I admire that he controlled the pace of the questioning by giving thoughtful answers, but not in a delay kind of a way. Anytime he had any kind of a pause, he explained the pause and said, this is because I'm considering this or that, and I'm trying to make sure I give you the most accurate answer that I possibly can. I also really admired his process as he laid it out and how he made his decisions and what he was prepared to talk about and what he was not prepared to talk about based on the fact that he didn't come to any conclusions ahead of time. He said, I'm basing this on the evidence that I received and nothing else. His personal feelings really didn't seem to be involved. He very much gave the impression that he was a consummate professional about what he undertook. And I think that that's very admirable. Also, he just reiterated a lot of facts that came up during during those cases that definitely demonstrated patterns of behavior by Trump that did very strongly suggest he was attempting to interfere with the elections and to hide things from not his own attorneys, from the FBI, from any legal authority that he interacted with. Which is, if a person knows anything about his history, Trump's, I mean, they know that skirting the law is something that he's made a career out of. So I have to say, I admired Jack Smith before now because he undertook an incredibly difficult challenge in attempting to hold Trump responsible for his misdeeds, which was very clearly incredibly difficult because Judge Eileen Cannon did everything in her power to assist Trump and to stand in Jack Smith's way and be an impediment to him. So, which I still don't understand how everyone else in the judicial system just sat back and watched that happen without getting to the point of saying this is, that judge is coloring outside the lines, because she very clearly was, because she was bending over backwards to accommodate Trump in every single way she could. And it's the reason why now, in other more recent legal actions, people are proactively saying this can't go before Eileen Cannon because she's too suspect. But I think more than anything else, Jack Smith demonstrated what a true American would do, which is defend democracy and the rule of law, which I've argued are both on the decline in this country in a very major way. And really, he should be rewarded for what he did and what he's still doing. But instead, powerful people in government are trying to vilify him and, you know, trying to encourage people to doubt him, which was very difficult to do because he gave very good answers, very reasonable answers, really the kind of answers that strongly suggest that his actions were above reproach, not that they didn't try very hard. And it also makes perfect sense why Jim Jordan wanted this in a closed session, because it makes the Republicans look bad because they just kept trying to come up with different ways to argue that Trump should have special preferential treatment, which is not how the law is supposed to work. It's supposed to be the way things are supposed to work is that no one is above the law. Although, Trump and the Republicans are, and the Supreme Court, and yeah, a significant number of clearly biased judges are all trying to create a system, more of a two-tiered system than we already have. Obviously, we have a two-tiered system because if you're rich, you never get into trouble because you can buy your way out of it. But now they're saying that basically they're trying to make the argument, both, I mean, the Supreme Court, in deciding that the president deserves immunity from, you know, I mean, I think they said their argument was, well, in the course of fulfilling their duties as president, they're immune from any, you know, um, any penalties, any punishments. But there's a lot of things that Trump is doing right now that are very obviously not a part of presidential duties. Retribution is not a presidential duty, and he's retributing his way all over the place. But still, the argument I'm sure will be made, well, is, he's just, in order to be a good leader, he has to crush all opponents and anyone who stands in his way so that he can continue to lead unencumbered. But that's not true. The point of our system is that great power should be encumbered to avoid dictators and kings. That's why we have three branches of government, three co equal branches of government. That's how it's supposed to be, with no one outweighing or overpowering the others. But Trump has already proven that he's taken over Congress because, every Republican and a good number of Democrats are just cowards who are afraid to stand up even when they know things are wrong. But there's also clearly a significant number of judges who are also very eager to kowtow to all of Trump's demands because for some reason, it seems clear to me that a lot of people on the right think that Trump is working with them. But it's important to remember that Trump originally, in his first campaign, he started out as an independent. And he was considering which way to go and if he wanted to be a part of either of the established parties or not. And I think he landed on the Republicans just because they were more willing to submit to whatever he wanted. But Trump's only out for himself. And he's demonstrated that time and time again because he goes after Republicans as much as he goes after Democrats at this point. So he has no allegiances. Certainly, he doesn't care about any of the rest of us, which is all the more reason why someone like Jack Smith being willing to, tolerate an interrogation without without it being public, which he's the first person in this kind of position that was not granted a public hearing. But the whole thing's out now anyway, so people can watch for themselves if they want to. And I understand most people won't because either they don't care or they don't understand the significance of it. It's not clear to me why there is still seemingly so much indifference about these things because it affects all of our lives. But people, their attention is not easily penetrated by reality. There's too much nonsense that's much more distracting, I guess, and more easily digestible is probably the biggest part of it. I mean, they say that in order to, you know, get achieve a significant audience on YouTube, you have to talk to people like they're 10-year-olds, which I don't enjoy that. I don't want dumber content. That's not appealing to me. I like things that are thought provoking. I appreciate that. I want to expand my horizons, expand my understanding, not just be distracted by flashing lights and noise. But I don't know if I'm probably not in the majority about that, even though I would like to believe that the majority of people feel that way. So I really just basically think that Jack Smith is indeed an American hero, one of the very few remaining at this point, because it's easier to be a follower than to be a leader. And most people have decided they just want to go along with the crowd, regardless what the crowd is doing, no matter how cruel that might be or immoral. And I especially don't understand how religious people can support Trump because he really, his actions, his words and deeds seem to fly in the face of any kind of morals that I'm familiar with. And that really leads me to feel far more suspicious about religions. Not that I was not that I was really on board with organized religion before, but now it makes me wonder, well, they don't believe in God, they believe in power because they have gotten more than enough proof that Trump is not religious. That I mean, when you ask a person what their favorite passage from the Bible is and they say, "Oh, the whole thing." That's suggestive of a lack of knowledge and understanding on a subject. So I don't think he's ever read the Bible personally, and I don't really. I mean, he went to church once at the beginning of this administration and got lectured by got a lecture from a, I think she was a minister, and he really didn't enjoy that. So, and I'm sure, I believe that's the last time he was in a church, unless he went to a funeral or something since then. I think he might have. Anyway, churches are not familiar stomping ground for Trump. That's very clear. But religious people still want to convince themselves that he's on their side. I think, I don't know. I don't know. I shouldn't even, I shouldn't guess about these things because I don't know what's in a lot of people's minds at this point. It should be panic based on the way things are going, but I think maybe people are too ignorant about the reality of what's going on around them, or they're too busy just struggling to survive to pay any attention to it at all. When you're working double shifts or multiple jobs, and trying to get all the overtime in that you can, not a lot of time left to think about, politics and the inner workings of government. And also, and I want to be clear about this. There's a difference between ignorance and stupidity. A lot of times people use the word stupid as sort of the catch all phrase, but not everyone is stupid. A lot of people are simply unaware. They've never educated themselves on certain subjects. And so they don't know the difference between how things should work and how things are working. But it seems to me that Trump is trying to create a modern day banana republic, but instead of bananas, it's AI. So he wants an AI republic where him and, 12 or 15 other people are able to make all of the money and in the process ensure that everyone remains poor enough that they're too busy trying to earn enough to live and don't have time to question anything that's happening, which is not encouraging, but there it is. That's where we are. So, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, Jack Smith is a really great person, a great example of how things should work. And the fact that he is continuing to stand up to a very powerful and also very erratic and unstable person, which Trump has time and again proven himself to be, that's courageous. And also the fact that he's trying so hard to protect the people around him, his staff, and a lot of completely innocent people who were only doing their job, what they were expected to do. And I don't doubt that a lot of them were fine with the fact that it was difficult because they signed up to do the hard thing because they know it's important. Too few people are willing to do the difficult things because they're scared. or because they're greedy, or probably more likely both. So I personally think that Jack Smith is an example that I wish, more people would follow his lead and conduct themselves in the same way and stop backing down and stop negotiating with a tyrannical dictator and put their feet down, dig their heels in, and say, enough is enough. This has to stop now. So I really hope the day will come when the government is filled with people like Jack Smith and everyone like Trump and his sycophants are weeded out. But I have no idea how long that will take or if there will ever be sufficient public will to accomplish that. But Jack Smith is an example we should all follow. And anyone who cares about freedom and democracy should greatly admire and respect him and be very grateful to him for his service, for his continued service, even now, even in the face of all of this vitriol. So I'm personally grateful for him, and I really think everyone else should be too. And I don't know, I don't know if that'll ever end up being the case, but at least for me, he's a hero. I hope that he continues to do good work in whatever capacity he finds himself in because he is an asset to this country. He is an asset to all of us. He is protecting all of us, even when we don't appreciate it or just don't care. So I'm grateful for him. And I am continually disgusted by the behavior of Republicans, the cowardice of Republicans. Oh, one more. That's right. One more thing. The pin things. This whole phone tapping thing. That was the other thing that really drove me crazy. So these people in Congress were complaining about the fact that that was one of the things the Republican attorney said. He's like, well, why is anybody checking any kind of phone records for members of Congress? And to be clear, that's not the phones weren't tapped. The only information was who was called, who called them, and what was the duration of the call. And the Republican attorney said, well, if that information is publicly available, then that might allow people to get a clear idea of how these Congress people are making decisions, who's influencing those decisions. Why should that be a secret? Shouldn't we all know how they're making their decisions and who is influencing their decisions? I mean, that's the whole problem right now, is that it seems like a lot of private interests hold a huge amount of sway over many members of Congress. And so what they don't want is proof of their corruption. And so the Republican attorney was complaining about the fact that the information Jack Smith was getting might demonstrate their corruption. Why would anyone have a problem with rooting out corruption in government? That's an odd that's an odd position for the Republicans to take. I mean, in a vacuum, I guess. Obviously, under the circumstances, it's not hard to understand why, because Trump is the most corrupt president that we've ever had. So of course, they don't want their gravy train ended by people finding out about the gravy train. So yeah, I didn't hear any arguments presented by the Republicans that I could consider legitimate concerns for the integrity of democracy in any way, shape, or form. All I heard was a lot of people trying to scurry around and find a technicality that might justify opposing Jack Smith. And they failed. In my opinion, they failed. And I listened to the whole thing. And I mean, all the Democrat side. And that was the other thing that was very interesting because Democrats were all like, both sides were trying to lead him. The Republicans were trying very hard to lead him down roads that would entrap him in some sort of statement that might make him sound like he was somehow illegitimate in the way he conducted himself. And he admirably uh, combated that with the truth. But Democrats also tried to lead him, and he wouldn't let that happen either. He said, "I don't know. I don't have any evidence supporting that. I don't know about that." And he wouldn't draw any conclusions. He's like, "I can't say, how this would have ended up because we never took it to trial. We didn't get to the point of being found of him being found innocent or guilty. So, I have no opinion on what the punishment for that might have been." Just all around very professional guy. So, I really respect him, and I really think everyone else should too.